It's me, Brodie McLeod, coming to you from Room 6 on Nash Ward, Weston-super-Mare Hospital. And if you're seeing this on Facebook and you're a police officer, you can completely ignore that fact, even though it's part of a really serious liturgy of crimes spanning decades and involving some of the most wanted criminals in Western Europe. Some of the most hated as well. Child sex traffickers, terrorists, paedophiles, rapists, criminals, murderers, serial killers, all really, really bad people who I've dedicated the last sort of 10 years, 11 years of my life to try and sort of catch and outsmart and gather evidence on. I threatened quite a lot of them too. Loads of them got really scared for ages and were like too worried to leave their house, which made me pretty chuffed, to be fair. So there's this article I saw posted on the Home Office on the 31st of March, a couple of weeks back. It says police time will no longer be wasted investigating legal social media posts, freeing up officers to patrol the streets and tackle real crime. By scrapping non-crime hate incidents, we're balancing the protection of vulnerable communities whilst respecting free speech. I mean, I don't think that censoring people who post internet content linked to criminal investigations is protecting free speech. I think it's the opposite, isn't it? It's more like censorship. It's more like a kind of like a detraction or a diversion from, good holistic evidence gathering and criminology in the place of censorship. And I appreciate they probably spend a lot of time. They used to use this term chatter. So there's a lot of chatter about this or chatter about that. They used to use this term quite a lot about 10 years ago when they were monitoring people that they thought were Muslim extremists and radicalised youth who were Islamic, which is still a problem in the UK. There is still radical Islam, there is still anti-Semitism, there is still racism, there is still bigotry, there is still homophobia, there is still terrorism, there is still serial killers, there is still child sex traffickers who make their fucking money and their living out of providing little kids for sick fucks to have sex with. And they don't want to find out exactly who these people are, how they operate, or where they fuck up and expose themselves on things like Facebook. I don't agree with the Home Office decision at all. I think the internet monitoring GCHQ, spending hours, maybe rather than the police, investigating things like Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and Twitter for potential evidence is probably one of the most sort of credible and vital places that you can find out what, who people associate with. You can network who they are, sort of rolling with and what sort of things they're doing, what locations they've been at. So much evidence which is available through social media. I first asked Gemini to do a research on that police decision and it declined, so I've had to tweak it a little bit. Here's the research paper though. No, that's my internet search history. It's called The Digital Dilemma of State Duty, Public Safety, Social Media Intelligence and the Limits of Law Enforcement Intervention. So the jurisprudential imperative. Jurisprudence means like legal validity and kind of jurisdictional sphere. If you haven't heard the word jurisprudential before, just Google it. So the jurisprudential imperative, positive state obligations under human rights law. So the rapid digitisation of human interaction has shifted the boundary of public and private spaces, transforming how threats to personal safety, community cohesion and national security materialised. Under international human rights law, states are bound by negative obligations to refrain from unlawful interference in citizens' lives and positive obligations to actively protect individuals from infringements by third parties. The European Court of Human Rights has increasingly interpreted Articles 2, the right to life, 3, prohibition of torture or inhuman degrading treatment, and 8, right to respect for private and family life of the European Convention on Human Rights, ECHR, as imposing a positive duty on states to maintain a functional, legal and operational architecture capable of deterring, investigating and prosecuting cyber violence. The boundaries of these positive obligations have been rigorously defined through several ECTHR government judgments, demonstrating that the state cannot treat online spaces as a legal vacuum. So here's some cases. In 2008, the Finnish authority refused to identify an anonymous individual who posted a child's profile on a dating site, citing strict telecommunications confidentiality laws. In 2020, Lithuanian authorities refused to launch a pre-trial investigation into extreme homophobic hate speech and direct online threats of violence left on a public Facebook photograph of a same-sex kiss. In Russia, there was somebody who was subjected to repeated cyber violence, including cyber stalking, impersonation via social media posts, the non-consensual publication of intimate photos, GPS tracking, and online death threats. Another person, prison guard, reported misconduct by male colleagues and was subjected to a relentless campaign of physical and online harassment, causing severe psychological disorder. Someone else sent an email to colleagues alleging sexual harassment and was subsequently convicted of criminal defamation in French courts. In contrast to these severe interferences, the ECTHR has also demarcated the limits of Article 8 in instances where alternative remedies are available. For example, in a case where the chairman of a Catholic Parents Association alleged the state's refusal to investigate the receipt of pornographic spam emails, the court found that although the reception of undesirable communications was an interference with private life, the availability of computer filters meant that state intervention was not strictly required and no violation had occurred. Collectively, these rulings established that when online harassment or threats escalate into target an individual's physical or mental safety, the state bears a non-delegable positive obligation to intervene, investigate and prosecute. Systemic failures in threat assessment. So when state agencies ignore digital warnings, despite the evolving legal consensus on state obligations, a persistent gap remains between the transition of online warnings and real-world law enforcement intervention. When state agencies fail to act on digital threat intelligence, the consequences are frequently catastrophic, manifesting in preventable mass casualties and intimate partner violence. So you've got another little chart here: cause and location, digital warnings and evidence that got ignored. So in Florida, 2018, a YouTube comment under his real name stated, "I'm going to be a professional school shooter." A subsequent 13-minute phone tip detailed his rifle ownership, animal mutilations posted on Instagram, and his desire to kill. In the UK, in 2016, a guy bombarded somebody called Alice with aggressive text messages, hacked her social media, used location tracking and threatened extortion using secretly taken photographs. Someone else in Queensland in 2020 provided text messages to the police demonstrating non-lethal strangulation, stalking, phone hacking, rape and suspected child abuse by her estranged husband. The operational failures in these high-profile cases illustrate how administrative silos and a lack of risk assessment training prevent state agencies from connecting disparate digital data points. In the Parkland case, the FBI's call centre failed to process a highly specific warning, despite its duration and the caller's direct reference to Cruz's public Instagram accounts displaying weapons purchased with life insurance proceeds. Similarly, the earlier closure of a YouTube threat inquiry occurred because federal agents did not seek assistance from Google, which later confirmed it could have easily identified Cruz had the FBI requested help. In stalking and domestic violence cases, law enforcement's failure is often driven by a systemic tendency to treat individual online interactions in isolation. In the Alice Ruggles investigation, police officers administered a domestic abuse, stalking and honour-based violence risk assessment, despite positive answers indicating high risk factors such as recent separation, constant text-based harassment, a history of abuse and physical stalking. The police delegated the warning to a military officer rather than executing an arrest, leaving Ruggles entirely unprotected. In the case of Hannah Clark, Queensland Police police response was undermined by a failure to document critical allegations within the Q Prime database, which allowed the perpetrator to manipulate the legal system by portraying himself as a victim. A subsequent whistleblower complaint revealed that officers even provided advice to perpetrators on how to challenge the prosecution court order in court, directly amplifying the risk to the victim. Sorry, that was just some spam account that somebody added me to the other day, and what the fuck that's about, I don't care. The Susie Lumplugh Trust and the National Stalking Consortium have identified these failures as systemic across UK policing. Police forces frequently misclassify stalking as lower level offences like malicious communications or criminal damage. This misidentification misroutes victims through the incorrect legal pathways and leads to the premature closure of investigations. In the year ending March 2022, approximately 25% of all stalking reports in England and Wales were dropped due to a perceived lack of evidence, primarily because officers failed to retrieve and analyse digital records from messaging applications, emails, and of course social media platforms. So structural and technical bottlenecks, forensics backlogs, and administrative friction. The state's failure to act on intelligence is not solely a consequence of individual officer error. It is exacerbated by profound structural and technical bottlenecks within the criminal justice system. While digital evidence is now a factor in approximately 90% of all criminal investigations, the technical capacity of law enforcement has failed to keep pace. So you've got a column here, the operational matrix and the data point statistics. So forensic device backlog exceeds 20,000 devices across England and Wales. Typical wait times are 9 to 14 months for large forces. Failure to appear warrants. 59,153 arrest warrants issued in 2025, up nearly 50% since 2020. Crown Court backlog exceeded 74,200 cases in late 2024, nearly 80,000 in late 2025, projected to exceed 100,000 by 2028. That's how long you've got to wait, often in prison, before you even get your day in court to be assessed as criminal or innocent. Administrative file returns, so 46% of initial charging files submitted to the Crown Prosecution Service are returned to police due to incomplete digital evidence. And then you've got a South Yorkshire video deletion, so 96,000 body-worn video files were deleted, affecting 126 criminal cases. The forensic capacity crisis severely undermines the state's ability to deliver timely justice. The House of Lords Science and Technology Committee warned of a collapsing forensic science system. Nothing that the decentralised storage of evidence across 43 independent police forces has led to inconsistent standards and a high rate of lost or degraded exhibits. This technological backlog creates a compounding crisis. As digital investigations drag on, the Crown Court backlog swells, leading former Justice Secretary Alex Chalk to describe the system as a horror show driven by underfunding, court maintenance deficits and barrister shortages. The technical deficit also extends to the quality of initial case building. University of Leicester researchers highlighted that an inexperienced police workforce combined with severe time pressures frequently results in rushed investigations and incomplete digital files. This file quality issue disincentivises officers, especially when the Crown Prosecution Service fails to provide clear explanations regarding the relevance of further digital searches. Furthermore, the state's allocation of technical resources has been heavily criticised for displaying institutional and cultural bias. While domestic abuse victims struggle to secure basic forensic analysis of stalking evidence, police forces have dedicated significant technical capabilities to mass monitoring cultural expression. Under Project Alpha and Operation Domain, the Met Police constructed a database containing over 1,000 rape, rap and drill music videos. Officers with no formal training in Black British culture or linguistic nuances were utilised as expert witnesses in joint enterprise trials, interpreting artistic expression, face coverings and hand gestures as literal admissions of gang membership. This practice led back to the overcharging and mischarging of young black men under contentious secondary liability laws demonstrating a profound imbalance in the state's application of digital intelligence tools. Then we got a bit about legal frameworks and investigative guardrails, so OSINT and surveillance policies. So to address the expanding use of online platforms by criminal networks, public authorities utilise what they call open source intelligence, OSINT, and internet intelligence investigations. However, the collection of publicly available documentation remains subject to rigorous domestic and international legal standards, including the Human Rights Act 98, Data Protection Act and the UK GDPR. In the United Kingdom, primary statutory framework regulating covert online investigations is the Regulation of Investigative Powers Act RIPA 2000. Under RIPA, law enforcement agencies must distinguish between casual browsing and systemic monitoring of social media pages. So casual research, single isolated visits to a public profile or website do not require RIPA authorization. Covert directed surveillance, repeated systemic visits to a specific social media account that build a profile of an individual's private life constitute directed surveillance. This requires formal authorization from a senior officer or independent judicial authority and must satisfy a specific crime threshold, usually restricted to offences carrying a minimum prison sentence of 6 months. Covert human intelligence sources, CHIS. If an investigating officer creates a covert profile or fake identity to establish or maintain a relationship with a target, such as sending a friend request or joining private online groups, the officer must be authorised as a CHIS. Investigating officers are strictly prohibited from using personal accounts for these purposes and must log every digital transaction. So you've got, I don't know what the fuck this format's about, log component, operational requirement under RIPO. I think we'll just skip this bit, it's a load of bollocks. The rigorous structure of the UK's RIPA framework contrasts sharply with the policy environment of other jurisdictions. A comprehensive study by the Brennan Centre revealed that local law enforcement agencies in the United States often operate with virtually no safeguards governing social media surveillance. Out of nearly 2,000 lacked publicly available policies, and among that the 162 that did, fewer than half articulated any standards for social media investigations. Only 8 departments required officers to establish reasonable suspicion before seeking or retaining information from social media, providing a virtual invitation for phishing expeditions and the targeting of political activists. The consequences of this unregulated environment are illustrated by several prominent US cases. So in Memphis Police Department lawsuit, in Tennessee they successfully sued the Memphis police after an undercover officer created a fake Facebook account posing as a black activist. The officer friended local organisers, infiltrated private groups and compiled extensive dossiers on political activity, violating the department's consent decree and major platform policies against fake accounts. In, again, the United States, police arrested a black teenager for inciting a riot based solely on a Snapchat post. The arrest occurred because officers lacked contextual understanding. In reality, the teenager's post was a warning advising people to stay away from protests in his hometown to avoid danger. Again, in the US, the Plain View Project compiled a database of over 5,000 public Facebook posts made by active and retired police officers, including 3,000 posts attributed to Philadelphia officers that contained racist, violent or homophobic language. 3,000. Following a BuzzFeed expose, the Philadelphia Police Department suspended or placed 72 officers on restricted duty. 12 officers subsequently filed a First Amendment retaliation lawsuit. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that while public employee speech receives less protection, a stronger factual tether was required to dismiss the suit at an early stage, highlighting the complex legal interface between officer discipline and protected speech. Furthermore, the state's failure to utilise social media constructively extends to public emergency communications. During the 2014 civil unrest in Missouri, Following the shooting of Michael Brown, the local police department failed to engage on digital platforms. After passing the investigation to the St. Louis County Police, authorities published a single Facebook post on August 11, 2014, urging calm and promising regular updates. They then went silent for 15 days, creating an information vacuum that was quickly filled by unverified rumours. By the time a grand jury decision was announced, tweets were estimating at a rate of 52,000 per minute, leaving the state entirely unable to counter misinformation or coordinate public safety efforts online. So the Rebalancing Act, scrapping NCHIS and defending online expression. The state's failure to protect citizens from genuine online threats has occurred alongside over-policing non-criminal online expression, which has diluted core resources and eroded public trust. This tension is exemplified by the rise and fall of the non-crime hate incident recording system in England and Wales. The evolution and overreach of non-crime hate incidents. Following the 1999 Stephen Lawrence inquiry, Sir William Macpherson recommended that police formally log non-criminal racist incidents to track rising community tensions and prevent escalation into physical violence. By 2014, the College of Policing had expanded this recording mechanism to cover 5 protected characteristics: race, religion, sexual orientation, disability and transgender identity. Under this guidance, police were required to record an incident as an NCHI if the reporting party or anyone else perceived it to be motivated by hostility, with officers instructed not to challenge the subjective perception. So, take it at face value. The subjective nature of this recording mechanism led to police forces overzealously logging tens of thousands of everyday rows, online spats and perfectly legal social media posts. Because these incident records were sorted on the primary police database and could be disclosed during enhanced criminal record checks, the policy began to exert a severe chilling effect on lawful free speech. This systematic overreach culminated in several landmark chases. So, a case of Officer Harry Miller challenged the recording of NCHI against him for posting allegedly transphobic but lawful tweets. The Court of Appeal ruled that the College of Policing's guidance was unlawful, finding that the automatic recording of non-criminal speech represented a disproportionate interface with Article 10 rights of freedom of expression. Then you had a Met Police case in this country which said it would halt the investigation of non-crime hate incidents to reduce ambiguity after prosecutors dropped the high-profile case against television writer Graham Linehan, emphasising that officers must focus on matters meeting the threshold for criminal investigation. Again, in Essex, in the UK, police visited the home of journalist Alison Pearson to arrange an interview regarding a year-old social media post which had been reported by a member of the public as a potential hate crime. The intervention provoked widespread public debate regarding the line between lawful expression and criminal incitement, and highlighted the police's disproportionate allocation of resources to online disputes. Following these challenges and a formal review by the College of Policing and National Police Chiefs Council, the UK government officially scrapped NCHI system on the 31st of March 2026. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood announced a replacement system designed to prevent police from recording lawful free speech while ensuring that reports pointing to genuine harm still receive an appropriate response. So they are kind of still looking at it. Under the 2026 reforms, the broad 2011 national standard for incident recording was replaced with a narrower threshold. So police are now instructed to only record incidents where there's a clear policing purpose, strictly tied to preventing crime, protecting life and property, or maintaining public order. Incidents meeting this narrower threshold are no longer assigned crime reference numbers, and the use of criminal terminology such as victim and suspect has been prohibited. The digital surveillance paradox. While the state has scaled back its policing of subjective online comments through the NCHI reform, civil liberties groups such as Big Brother Watch highlight an underlying paradox. the state is simultaneously expanding invasive mass surveillance technologies. So in 2025, an unprecedented network of fixed live facial recognition cameras was deployed across Croydon town centre, that's a place in London, despite the UK's human rights regulator declaring the Metropolitan Police's use of lawful face recognition unlawful. So LFR technology, which matches live camera feeds against the police watch list in real time, has been heavily criticised for displaying significant racial bias. In 2025, approximately 80% of individuals that were misidentified by the LFR systems in London were black guys. So it gets it wrong, and it's a racist bit of technology, basically. The expansion of surveillance is further reinforced by the Online Safety Act that came in 2023 and the proposed Data Use and Access Bill. The Online Safety Act empowers regulators to demand that platforms implement highly effective age assurance (HEAA), creating a de facto digital ID requirement for the internet and enforcing the age gating of basic political discussion channels. More critically, the legislation contains clauses that allow the state to compel private messaging intermediaries to use client-side scanning technology, effectively eroding end-to-end encryption and compromising the security of billions of users under the guise of child safety. Concurrently, the DUA bill weakens historical data protection safeguards by granting the executive broad Henry VIII powers to determine recognised legitimate interests for processing personal data without consent, and permits automated decision making in law enforcement and intelligence without meaningful intervention. This creates a profound operational disconnect. The state is building a pervasive automated infrastructure capable of permanent identity checks and communication interception, yet it remains structurally and forensically unable to protect individual citizens from targeted, highly specific and legally actionable threats of violence transmitted via social media. So in conclusion, and policy recommendations. So the safety of citizens in the digital age is undermined by a profound imbalance in how the state handles online intelligence. To fulfil its positive human rights obligations to protect physical and psychological safety while preserving the fundamental liberties essential to a democratic society, the state must implement the following structural and legislative reforms. The first one, Gemini reckons, is to establish independent national forensic infrastructure, saying that the responsibility for processing and storing digital forensic evidence should be removed from individual police forces and transferred to an independent national digital storage and analysis capacity. A bit like they've done with fraud. It used to be every cop shop used to have a fraud department. Now they do it all in the City of London Police at Action Fraud, an organisation similarly set up to deal with specific types of crime. This transition is required to eliminate the inconsistent standards, technical vulnerabilities and backlogs that currently delay prosecutions and cause critical evidence loss. It also should implement automated threat tagging, triaging. Law enforcement agencies must transition away from subjective, perception-based incident logging and adopt automated, risk-focused triaging systems. These systems must be calibrated to prioritise explicit threats of violence, cyber-stalking patterns and domestic abuse markers over non-criminal disputes and cultural expression, ensuring that police resources are directed strictly towards core policing duties. They reckon they should mandate specialist domestic abuse and stalking training, so all officers interacting with victims of harassment or domestic violence must complete mandatory training provided by specialist external organisations. This training must focus on recognising cyber stalking, GPS tracking and online coercive control as a continuous course of conduct rather than treating digital communications as isolated low-level incidents. It reckons it should also enact statutory limits on biometrics and AI surveillance. So to prevent the emergence of a permanent mass surveillance infrastructure, the legislature must enact a strictly statutory framework governing the use of biometrics, facial recognition and algorithmic decision making using the baseline protections of the EU AI Act. Automated surveillance must be prohibited in public spaces except under judicial warrant where there's a reasonable suspicion of serious criminal activity. And of course, it says that you should standardise platform cooperation for immediate threats. The state must establish a standardised, transparent legal protocol with major social media and telecommunications platforms. This framework must compel platforms to rapidly verify metadata and identify individuals issuing explicit threats of mass violence or targeted physical harm, while preserving strong encryption protocols for the general public's private communications. What do you think about this? Let me know in the messages and the comments, and don't kill anyone and put it on Facebook, otherwise the police will probably ignore it.